As we continue on now, the Biyam Derkecha continues that the Otzros Chaim concludes this section by pointing out that what we've been discussing in the last number of shiurim, that is the first Tzimtzum, the first constriction of the Ma'atzil Elyon, of the upper emanator. And that is that as we'll continue, we'll see that there were other constrictive acts that took place, but we have described the first one, which is the root and the basis for everything that followed. Because as we've discussed, this was the time where the full power of God's light was hidden from those within creation, and that created the possibility of there existing other beings. All of the other tzimtzumim, all of the other constrictions that we will come across as we go on, they are all different types of tzimtzumim, meaning not all constrictions are created equal. For certain situations, certain objects, certain people, there may be a greater or lesser constriction, meaning in certain situations, the availability of our being able to pierce the veil in order to perceive God clearly will be different in one situation from another. So the various other tzimtzumim, the various other constrictions that exist, those are all a reflection of the different types of hiding of God's presence. In a footnote, he points out that to keep in mind that this is one of the foundational concepts in Kabbalah, which we should review many times and pray that we understand it properly. And not to forget that the entirety of existence is God's infinite light, but it is hidden from us by the various constrictions within which the infinite reveals itself in myriad different ways. But any revelations such as it is a revelation of God's infinite light. In a footnote entitled Darchei Havoda, where the Biyam Derkecha explains sort of like a practical application of the Kabbalistic concepts within our lives, he says that oftentimes in our life, we feel that we're lacking in our inner spiritual existence. And we feel a thirst for God, like the pasuk says, "Tzamalacha nafshi," my soul thirsts for you. Because even though the neshama, the soul, is always in connection with God, but the rest of ourselves and the neshama itself existing as it is within this constricted state, we feel that thirst and that emptiness. Because there is a feeling that we have an independent existence. That's the feeling that we get because of that lack of a full sense of the connection. But at the same time, we sense a connection to God's infinite light. We want more of it. And it is through that thirst and that hope that we draw down the God's light into ourselves. And we need to understand that when we find ourselves in a state in which we feel that we are lacking in that connection, we're lacking in that feeling of God's presence, that's part and parcel of a person's spiritual makeup. Because it is only because of the thirst that comes as a result of tzimtzum, and therefore we feel something's lacking, that's what brings us to desiring and wanting and seeking and searching for that connection. And it's only after we do that seeking and that searching that the connection is going to come, because it's not something that's just going to come on its own. Now, even though earlier he had mentioned that when a person finds himself in a state of darkness, what he has to do is get himself out of that darkness and connect directly with the light of God. But he explains that really there's different levels of darkness. Because there are some times that a person needs, sort of like related to something I posted earlier today in a text post on Facebook, sometimes we need to withdraw ourselves away from this world in which we live. And by doing so, to get out of that state of Tzimtzum, of constriction, and to be able to connect with God. But sometimes we have to stay in the darkness and to desire, to thirst, to want, to pray until Hashem shines his light in the darkness and all of the darkness turns to light. The rule is, generally speaking, the darkness is meant to drive us to seeking out God within our existence. But if we find ourselves falling into a state of total darkness, we're ready to just give up entirely, then we've got to take a little bit of a faster approach and break ourselves out of the Tzimtzum and figure out how to connect directly with God. Thank you very much for listening. And as I've mentioned previously, if anybody would like to sponsor any of the shiurim that we are offering, please feel free to reach out to me. Have a very good evening.